Hello lovelies, in this video the brilliant Mr. B is going to be looking at linear factorisation for your GCSE maths. Now there are 15 different examples here, work through really slowly, so take your time with this video, jump forwards or backwards as you feel you need to, and let's get started.
We're going to have a look at factorising linear expressions. We get right into the first question. It says factorise 3x plus 9. Now to show you what factorisation means, let's have a look at what 3x plus 9 means. So firstly, we've got 3x. So we would have 1x, 2x, and 3x. Okay, next we've got plus 9. So we have 9 numbers. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. So 9 numbers, and each one is going to be worth 1. So all of those together would add up to 9. So that's a visual representation of 3x plus 9. Now, what we mean by factorise is there a way to fit these numbers into groups? And I can fit these numbers into groups. So I could have a group with an x and 3 ones in it. And I could have another group with an x and 3 ones in it. And I could have a third group with an x and 3 ones in it. And when I say we've got to put them into groups, each group has got to be exactly the same. And we kind of want to put the kind of smallest amount of numbers into each group. So are there any ways we could divide this up into even more sections? Well, given that we only have 3 x's, we can't have more than 3 sections because each section would have to have at least 1 x in it. So this is the way that we can group these up with the smallest amount of numbers in each group. Now, if I write out what each group has using numbers, each group has got 1 x and it's got 1, 2, 3 numbers in it. So each group is x plus 3. And we've got 3 groups. So we've got this 3 times. So how can we write this down nicely? Well, the way we write it is we're going to use some brackets. So we're going to say that we have got 3 lots of x plus 3. And that's the answer. That's how you write it down. The numbers in brackets are the groups we have with the smallest amount of numbers in possible. And we can see visually we've got those 3 groups with x plus 3 in. And outside the brackets is where we say how many we've got. And when you have a number next to a bracket, it does mean multiply. So it's saying that we've got 3 lots of x plus 3. Now, moving on to question 2, we don't want to draw diagrams like this every single time. So what do we do? Well, the way to do this is you have to think about which times table all of the numbers are in. So question 2, we've got a 4, we've got a 16. So you think, well, which times table are both those numbers in? And they're both in the 2 times table and they're both in the 4 times table. So the largest times table that you could spot both numbers are in, that's always going to be the number on the outside of your brackets. So we're going to split this up into 4 groups. Now, how do we split something into 4 groups? Well, that's divide by 4. So we're going to divide our original expression by 4. So 4x divided by 4 is 1x, and 16 divided by 4 is 4. So we have a 2-step process. The first step is find the largest times table that both numbers are in, the largest number that would divide into both, the largest factor. And then once you've found that number, do the division. So looking at question 3, we've got 6x and 48. What's the largest number that would divide into both? Well, they're both in the 6 times table. So let's write 6 on the outside. And then we'll divide that expression by 6. So 6x divided by 6 is 1x, and 48 divided by 6 is 8. And that's our answer. We would have 6 groups of x plus 8. Now, before we move on, what if we didn't spot that 48 was in the 6 times table, but we did know that 48 was in the 3 times table? And what if somebody wrote a 3 down instead, and they divided by 3? So they do 6x divided by 3 is 2x, and 48 divided by 3 is 16. What would happen if they wrote this number instead, 3 lots of 2x plus 16? Well, it's mathematically correct. It is factorised. It is exactly the same as the expression 6x plus 48, but you'll notice that inside the brackets we have larger numbers, and when we factorise we're always looking for the smallest possible numbers. So the second alternative is not going to be acceptable because we have an alternative with smaller numbers inside the brackets. And if you think about how you'd write that down on a sheet of paper, the 6 and then x plus 8 in the brackets, that's only using 6 symbols to represent it. Whereas the 3 with a 2x plus 16 in brackets, that's using 8 symbols. So it's using kind of more space on the page, more effort to write it down. That's why that's not going to be the correct answer. So moving on to question 4, we've got 4x and 20. I know they're both even, both the 2 times table, but I'm not going to do that because there's a larger number I can use, and actually 20 is in the 4 times table. So we can have a 4 outside the brackets as a factor. If we did 2 though, we would have got a more complicated answer. It wouldn't have been correct and get us the answers for an exam. So 4 is the times table we're looking at. Let's divide these numbers by 4. So 4x divided by 4 is 1x, and 20 divided by 4 is 5. Now, a big thing that confuses a lot of students is the symbol in the middle, and they're usually okay with plus. When it comes to takeaway, some students might actually try and do a takeaway, maybe do 4 takeaway 5 or 20 takeaway 5, and get a bit confused. If you've got a takeaway sign, just write in a takeaway sign. It's not actually going to do anything because x is an unknown number, so we can't actually take away from it. So just leave the takeaway in there, and we could do a takeaway if we found out what x was, but since we don't know, we're going to leave it as it is. Now looking at the last question, 7x takeaway 14. So you should spot that 7 and 14 are both the 7 times table. They can both be divided by 7. 7 is the largest common factor of those two numbers. So let's write down 7. And now let's divide by 7. So 7x divided by 7 is x, and 14 divided by 7 is 2. My expression's got a minus, so my answer is going to have a minus as well. Moving on to the medium questions, you'll notice we have less numbers involved and more letters. Now, you can still find factors of these, even though we've only got one number. And to show this, we'll look at the factors of our first question, the x squared and the 4x. Now, when we're looking at x squared, factors are numbers that divide into it, and x squared's got no numbers, so how do we divide into it? Well, what if we divided it by x? X squared divided by x is x. You've got 2 sets of x's, and if you divide it by x, one of those sets of x's is going to be cancelled out. Now, why does that work? Well, what if we did just x divided by x? What's that going to give us? Now, it's quite an interesting answer, actually, because you think about it. 10 divided by 10 is 1. 1 10 fits into 10. And 7 divided by 7 is 1. 1 7 fits into 7. And 1,000,000 divided by 1,000,000 is 1. So when we look at x divided by x, you can fit 1x into x. So x is a factor of x. It can be divided into it, and you get a whole number answer. So going back to x squared, we can divide that by x, because if we write it as a column, x squared divided by x, write it as a fraction. Now x squared means x multiplied by x. So what happens if we cancel an x off the top and the bottom? Well, we're doing x divided by x is 1. So we get a 1. And what happens if you multiply by 1? Well, x times 1 is just going to be x. It doesn't do anything. So therefore, the answer to x squared divided by x, I've only got 1x left here on the top row. It's been multiplied by 1, so it'll be x, it'll stay the same. And it's not being divided by anything anymore because we got rid of that at the start. So x squared divided by x is just x. So what does all this mean? Well, it just means that numbers are factors of themselves. So letters are also factors of themselves. So when looking at question 1, factorise x squared minus 4x, not only are we looking for times tables, we're looking for the largest numbers that divide in, we can also look for letters that divide in, and we're looking for repeated letters. So we can actually say that x is a factor of x squared, and it's a factor of 4x. It will divide into both. And then we look at numbers. We don't have a number on both parts, so we can't take any numbers out for this question. But what we can do now is we can actually divide by x. Just like on the easy questions, we divided by the numbers. So we'd have x squared divided by x, which is x as we just discussed. And then we've got 4x divided by x. Now, if 1x divided by x is 1, then 4x divided by x would be 4. And then finally, we've got a takeaway sign in there. So let's put the takeaway sign in the answer. So that's how you factorise with letters. So using the same technique with question 2, factorise x squared take away x, we don't have any numbers we can divide both of those by, but they both have an x in. So let's divide them by x. So x squared divided by x is x, and x divided by x is 1. We've got the takeaway in there, so again, we've got our answer. Factorising x squared minus x would get x lots of x minus 1. Now looking at question 3. So again, looking at the letters, we've got an x on both sides. So x would be a factor. So let's divide by x. X squared divided by x is x, and 9x divided by x is 9. And there's a plus sign in the question. Let's have a plus sign in the answer. Question 4 is very similar, but you'll notice we've now got a y on the end. Now, we can't take that y out because it's only on one of the terms. We can only take out letters that are on both terms. And since both terms have got an x, we can take out x. So let's divide by x. So x squared divided by x is x. And then 9xy divided by x, we're just going to get rid of the x in there. Because, like we mentioned before, if you divide them by itself, you get 1. And then when we've got 9xy, those numbers are all being multiplied together next to each other. So if we did x divided by x to get a 1, we're going to have 9 times 1 times y. And 9 times 1 is 9. Timing by 1 doesn't change anything. So effectively, all we need to do is get rid of the letter. Now looking at the final question, we've got y squared plus 14xy. Now both sides have got a y, so y can be taken out as a factor, but we don't have an x on the first term, so we can't take out x. So let's divide by y. So y squared divided by y, well, if x squared divided by x is x, y squared divided by y would be y. And then 14xy, we're dividing by y, so we get rid of a y. And actually, that's what we did with the squared sign as well, because if it's squared, you've got two y's multiplied together. So if you take a y out as a factor, your two y's drops down to one y. Now, moving on to the hard questions, we can see we've got a lot more letters and numbers involved, but we're not going to panic because we use the same methods we use on the easy and the medium questions. And we're going to use the easy method first when we looked at the numbers. So question 1, factorise 3x squared plus 9xy. We've got a number 3 and we've got a number 9. So we're going to look at those first. And then second, we'll look at the letters and use the methods we use on the medium questions. We've got the x squared. Now that little 2's not counting as a number, so telling me that I've got two lots of x's, and we've got the xy. So now the first thing to do is use the easy method with the numbers on the green highlighted numbers we have here. So 3 and 9. What's the largest number? That divide into both, and that would be 3. They're both in the 3 times table. And then once we've dealt with the numbers, look at the letters. We've got x squared and xy. Do they both have a letter in both? Well, yes, we've got x, so we can take x out as a factor as well. So we've got one factor from the numbers, and we've got one factor from the letters. Let's write them down next to each other. Now we've done that, just like we did before, we can now divide by this. Again, with dividing, we'll split it up into a number section and a letter section. So we'll divide by 3x. Let's divide by 3 first. So 3 divided by 3 would be 1, and then x squared divided by x would be x. So we want 1x. Then look at the second term, divide by 3 first. So 9 divided by 3 is 3. Then look at letters. We've got x, y. We're dividing that by x, so we're going to drop off the x. We'll keep the y. And there's our answer. One thing you notice that I didn't write 1x. Now, the reason for that is in algebra, we don't tend to write ones that multiply. And like I discussed in the medium questions, if you times by 1, it doesn't make a difference. There's no point writing it down. So while 3 divided by 3 was 1, you can write that down if it helps you with working out. In your final answer, you do not want that 1. So moving on to question 2 with the same thing, we'll have a numbers section with the 4 and the 4, and a letters section with the x squared and the x. So looking at the number section first, let's find some factors. We have 4 and 4, so they are both in the 4 times table. Then with the letters section, we have x squared and x, so they both have an x. So with numbers, we want the largest times table, the largest factor, the largest number that divides into both. With the letters, we want which letter is in both terms. So once we've done that, we can now start our bracket. We're going to use the numbers first, and we're going to start with 4 divided by 4, which is 1. And then with the letters, we have x squared divided by x, which would be x. So that will give us 1x. I'm not going to write the 1, we talked about that already, so we've just got the x. Let's look at the second term. Now again, we're going to have 4 divided by 4 is 1. And then we're going to have x divided by x, which is 1 as well. So while I wouldn't normally write down a 1, because they're both going to give me a 1, I'm going to have to write it down. So we only don't write 1s in algebra if it's been multiplied or divided. If it's been added or subtracted, we're going to need it there. Let's repeat the process with question 3. So we've got a number section with a 3 and a 9, and a letter section with the x squared and the x, y. So dividing numbers first, we've got a 3 and a 9, they are both in the 3 times table. Then the letters, we've got an x squared and an x, they've both got an x. And now let's divide by 3x. We'll divide by 3 first, so 3 divided by 3 is 1, and then we'll divide by the letters. X squared divided by x is x. That gives us 1x. Now let's do the second term. 9 divided by 3 is 3. Then letters xy divided by x, so get rid of the x, just have the y left. Now, you should notice that question 3 we've just done and question 1 have got almost exactly the same answer. And the one difference is question 3 has got a minus in the brackets and question 2 has got a plus in the brackets. I just want to show you again that just because we've got a plus or a minus in the brackets doesn't mean that we're actually going to be doing any adding up or taking away at this point. We can only collect like terms. We can't add together an x and a y. We can't take away an x and a y. We'll just leave it as it is. But again, it's important to know that the plus and the minus will not have an impact on the letters or the numbers in the question. Now we're going to take a look at question 4. Okay, we'll have a number section with the 32 and the 28, and a letter section with the x squared and the x. Now, with all these questions, first number has been our factor. With 32 and 28, both these numbers are not in the 32 times table. So what can we say about these? Well, they're both even, so we definitely have 2 as a factor. So think about other even numbers. I think they can both be divided by 4. And could they be divided by 6? Well, 6 times 6 is 36. That's too close to 32. So 6 isn't going to work. And it's worth checking 8 as well. Now, I think 8 does go into 32, but does 8 go into 28? Well, 8 times 3 is 24. That's too close. So I think 4 is going to be the largest number that divides into both. They are both in the 4 times table. Then we'll look at the letters, x squared and x. They have both got an x. So now we can start to divide. So let's divide by 4 first. 32 divided by 4 is 8. Then do your letters. x squared divided by x is 1x. Then look at the second term. 28 divided by 4 is 7. And then we have x divided by x, which is 1. And 7 times 1 is 7. So there's our answer. So the final question, we've got a 12 and a 14 for our numbers. Now, both of those are in the 2 times table. That's going to be the largest times table they're both in. And then for the letters, we've got an x squared and an xy. Both of those have got an x. So now we found our factors, we can divide. Divide by 2 first. 12 divided by 2 is 6, and 14 divided by 2 is 7. Just leaving a space for any letters I might need. Then x squared divided by x is x, and 14xy, xy divided by x, get rid of the x, we just have a y left over. Make sure you close your brackets at the end, and we've got our final answer.
Ouch! This is why in some videos I have unexplained scratches.